Hello there, gamerinos and gamerinas. Welcome to UnicornStorm. This is Rady, and I just found one of the most intriguing and entertaining games to be released this year. At least that's what I thought before I discovered that this is actually just a demo. Now, the big Volume 1 in the title could have clued me in on that, right? And I mean, of course it wasn't a huge surprise. On the other hand, I really tried to look up whether this here is a full game or not. The Volume 1 could refer to other planned games in the same universe or set up a story containing multiple games. It's not like things like that never happen. Or it is just a quirky naming thing, since a few elements of this game are music themed, like a new game being called a track, and you use the radio to save on cassette tapes, so maybe it refers to that. The store page never describes it as just the prologue or a demo or anything. It only talks about the epic journey you get to undertake. And so does the studio's homepage. And the info page where I received the key from. The games page on itch.io calls it a demo, but in that case, it's a 2-year-old release. So yeah, the sudden end had somewhat of a sour taste. None of these places mention a roadmap for the game. It's not designated as a series or season. There's no information on how many chapters there will be and whether they're released one at a time or all at once. If this were a free game, I'd look at this differently. Or if it were an early access game. I mean, stuff like this is perfect for that format. Just say it's still in development, you buy the first chapter and the other chapters will be released at a later date. Instead, this is just a game you can buy on Steam. Buy for $7 or so bucks. Not hugely expensive, but for my taste, more than I'm comfortable to pay for a short story kickoff that ends when the actual journey is about to start. Now look, all this ranting is purely about how the game is presented, advertised. It's about the communication. You don't really know what you get from a purchase. And this should be addressed, especially since they're already taking money for it. The game itself, though, is awesome. I'm so looking forward to the full release. The little bit that's already here is so amazing, so unique, so creative. It's absolutely worth playing. Now, Ekorella is a retro-styled JRPG, which makes a lot of sense since it was created with the RPG Maker. And this is another example of a game taking a more fresh and unique approach to classic JRPGs than most games developed with this really powerful and easy to use tool. Similar to Horror Veil from last year, which quickly became one of my favorites. On a related note, the current version of the RPG Maker called RPG Maker With just released for consoles and I'm looking forward to checking it out. See if you can actually create something worthwhile on a more restrictive system like the PlayStation, for example. But back to the game. Ekorella takes place in a world inhabited by sapient anthropomorphic plants, and also sometimes more and sometimes less intelligent animals and insects. Well, I guess that also goes for the plants, because there are still a lot of trees and bushes, grass and weeds all over the place. We take control of this little tomato dude, who immediately stood out from the rest of the characters, like when it comes to his design. He kinda looks like a green anime boy, while all the other characters have way more prominent plant features. The little orange boy's head is completely round and his body is like a green twig. The palm tree dude is just this long bulky shape. The cacti, well, they are cacti. The main character looks out of place in a way. It's not a huge deal. And maybe this is even deliberate, since he is pretty much out of place in this town, in this community, or when it comes to his status as well. The lore is told in small bites every now and then, and much of it is still unknown, but you can infer quite a bit from the things you get explicitly told, but also those you can observe around you. We know that the world is divided into different sectors, each with a different purpose, and that at some point the tomatoes became the ruling class. This seems to be some kind of military state, or at least a state where the military is involved quite a bit in the affairs of private citizens. The story also seems to take place during or shortly after some kind of industrialization, where bountiful and sacred orchards became building sites for factories. The polluted land became corrupted, and so did the plants and animals within. So these lost orchards are restricted areas. And now, as our heroes enter the story, something very sinister is brewing within the corrupted earth. Some particularly distorted beings are leaving their contaminated home and wreak havoc among the peaceful inhabitants of this world. On paper, it's a JRPG story as classic as Final Fantasy. Imbalance in the world causes a dark power to send forth its minions. But it's all in the presentation with this game. We play as a shy tomato boy who can't really stand up for himself, and who befriends a conspiracy theorist Orange, believing in aliens replacing the townsfolk and wearing a tin hat at all times, with the extra detail that you can't unequip the hat on the character screen. And a metalhead palm tree who tries really hard to be the voice of reason of the group, and is more of a big brother to the others and always looks out for them. They get entangled in all this mess because a dog snatched their board game and fled into the Forbidden Orchard, so of course they have to sneak in themselves to get it back. The polluted orchard isn't a dead and desolated place, or a fortress of evil. It's this somewhat eerie, unkempt garden where you find the overgrown ruins of civilization and rusted, moss-covered cars. The music in here is still upbeat and you even hear birds chirping. The writing is filled with a good portion of contemporary humor, without getting all too memey. The comedy stems mostly from the, more often than not, good-natured banter between the characters, both major and minor, and the pleasant artwork often provides the punchline. So, this already sounds pretty good, doesn't it? A laid-back RPG in a unique setting with a really striking visual design and some good character writing. What more do you want? Well, if your answer to that is really fucked up creepy shit, then that's what you get. The game doesn't hold back when it comes to the monsters and to showing the corruption and how it impacts the world and the characters. While this game doesn't outright become a horror game, it features many horror elements to tell its story. The actual monsters, not just the little critters that are sometimes hostile, have some really grotesque designs, and the way they move or behave is outright terrifying. But the frights are not just about the scary monsters, though they are really well made. There's also scenes of violent, sudden death and disfiguration, some actual planned body horror, and also a bit of psychological horror. The game uses these elements to set the mood in each scene. Again, this isn't a horror game and I don't think it becomes one later. But when I'm in a dangerous situation, like faced with an overwhelming threat, which is something that occurs often in JRPGs, instead of just telling me that I have no chance of winning in some form or another, without presenting it as this scary, panic-inducing thing, like, let's be honest, many games do, this game here makes the threat actually scary, changes the atmosphere completely. Yeah, your characters shit themselves right now, and you should too. Hey, when the threat is gone, we can have chill and pleasant music and bright and warm colors again. But for now, it's terror time. And the same goes for showing the character's mental state, when they're in shock or otherwise negatively affected. This hits so much harder than just having the character, I don't know, fall to their knees and explaining their trauma or something. Not saying that this can't work, I mean, it did so really well a lot of times in a lot of great games. But it is refreshing to see it done like this, every once in a while. I mean, this game, starts with this. I got immediately hooked. So this first chapter contains your little hometown where you can mostly just talk to the different residents and get some flavor conversations, as well as the corrupted orchard and the factory within. There are one or two side areas, but that's mostly it. The orchard itself isn't all that big, but it has a good size for an introductory dungeon. It's not a labyrinth, but especially with all the minor collectible items, there is a bit of puzzle solving involved when it comes to the navigation. As for the factory, it features a large amount of interconnected rooms, winding corridors and of course dead ends. And actually 3 different routes to the end. Something I discovered after clearing it. I guess like most people. It's a nice approach to dungeon design and I hope the team sticks with it for the rest of the game. Battles are random and happen suddenly, like in the good old days. But this game still opts for a compromise in having some clearly designated danger areas where battles occur, mostly tall grass. Though there are some rooms that are danger areas in and of itself, where monsters appear regardless of where you're standing. Combat itself is turn and stat based. As is RPG Maker tradition, you first select your actions and then every combatant executes their action in order from fastest to slowest. And here again, the amazing sprite work really shines. Battle animations are detailed and have so much charm. Well, everything in this game is full of charm. Your little conspiracy theorist is also an engineer and inventor, so he uses all kinds of gadgets, kinda like Edgar from Final Fantasy VI. But everything is still done in a childlike way, so he uses a magnifying glass to burn enemies, has a little toy car explode on them, or throws a mallet. Your metalhead is the bard of the group, who would have thought, and uses tasty tunes to buff or heal the party or stun enemies with some eardrum shattering noise. And your main hero is a fist fighter, a rather clumsy fist fighter who stumbles into the enemy and hurts them accidentally. Another nice touch is how differently the characters work in battle. I guess the Shin Megami Tensei games are to blame for this trend, but as it has been established for a while now, your brawler uses mostly his HP for his special attacks, while the bard uses energy points or mana or whatever. The engineer instead has limited uses on all his attacks, though they recharge each fight. So you have to use a different approach and different tactics with each fighter. So combat is very dynamic and stays fresh with each new ability you learn, which doesn't just straight up make your characters more powerful, but more so diversifies their playstyle even more. And also makes them straight up more powerful. And you level up rather quickly, so you learn new abilities quite often. The difficulty with the combat encounters is all over the place. In the Orchard, I was mostly, I guess, on level with the enemies. They weren't complete pushovers, but I also wasn't on the brink of death after each encounter. But sometimes you get a random battle where the enemies just wreck your shit. Where they have so much health and deal so much damage, act faster than you, avoid your attacks. Thing is, for the most part, I got through these encounters, even multiple ones in a row. So I guess you can't call it unbalanced. As soon as you enter the factory, this becomes the norm. Every enemy takes off huge chunks of your health and has annoying abilities which prolongs the battles, so they can hurt you even more. It's still possible to get through and you find lots of healing, and if you explore carefully, you unlock helpful shortcuts to get easy access to your save points and full party heals. So the encounters are very much manageable, but not necessarily a good time. But again, maybe that's deliberate. Or it actually is unbalanced and will get fixed later on. But yeah, so far, I'm having a great time with this game. Or I guess I had, since it's only the first chapter. I explored and goofed around a bit and it took me 4 hours to clear it. So I'm certain there will be quite a bit to do in the finished game. Let's hope it will get finished. I have seen far too many RPG Maker games with promising demos that never saw a full release. And it would be such a shame in the case of this game. It's such an engaging experience, it's so masterfully presented with outstanding pixel art and animation and map design. They really went all out on this game. Still, since it does cost money, you should be aware of the possibility that this story might never get concluded and that all you get for now is somewhat of a prelude. A really darn great prelude, but it stops where you begin to get into the whole thing. Do I recommend it? Well, I certainly would recommend playing it. I'm glad that I stumbled across it. But when it comes to buying it, well, if you're okay with it being only a demo, even if they call it the first chapter, and without having any guarantee that it will get finished, then go for it. It's an amazing little game and I hope the team sticks with it and sees it to completion. And with that, I'm off. I wish you the greatest of days. This has been Rady, and I hope to see you again on the next game.